Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/eggsshow. Audible has more than 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or just about any device you can imagine. As loyal listeners to the Eggs Show, you can download a free audiobook today by visiting audibletrial.com/eggsshow. Again, audibletrial.com/eggsshow for your free audiobook courtesy of Audible.
Cool.
Yeah. So, hey everybody, welcome to the show. We got a exciting, kind of new episode of Eggs for you. So it's, I guess, Tuesday night. It's July 31st.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, can you believe it? Yeah, well, I mean, we're an hour off of August 1st, but right now,
still.
at this moment, it's the 31st.
When did we leave for LA?
It's been 2 weeks now.
On the 11th.
Yeah,
right?
That sounds right. And so we're sort of in the middle of August, vacation time, summer time, stuff like that. So what Mike and I have done is we decided to put together a little clip show of basically just the CEOs and business owners that we've had the pleasure of visiting with in the semi-recent past.
Yeah, the last one we did was a music-themed one. And we figured...
and that one unfortunately wasn't that long ago, but it's just the summer and we're getting around so much right now. It's difficult to get together and actually coordinate, time to pull off a show. Although I will say in our defense, we did have sort of a tentative guest lined up and that didn't work out. So
well, yeah, it was kind of last minute.
Another CEO, by the way, which would have been a good one.
Yeah, that would have been great.
But that's okay. We'll circle around and get him eventually. But so anyway, so in the heat of all this travel, basically, as Mike was just mentioning, we had gone to California, as everybody heard and seemed to enjoy by the number of people listening to those episodes. We went down to LA. We did a handful of episodes with Chris Doe from Blind and the Future, which was fantastic and life-changing for all of us.
Great experience.
Also, we had an opportunity to sit down with my old pal Johnny from the band OPM. And for anybody who's been listening to the show, you've noticed the two-part epic that was the
4 hours of amazingness.
Literally four and a half hours of just Johnny telling sort of the past, present, and future of OPM and just life in the music business. It was really cool. And to be perfectly honest, I loved what Mike and I had done, not to toot our own horn, but I mean, it was sort of decided to let that episode be a little bit raw and leave it in sort of the form in which it was recorded, meaning we didn't really clip it down or edit it or cut anything out. And we probably could have, like, it probably could have been made to move a little quicker or whatever. But like literally we have parts of the show where people are walking in and out of the studio and changing seats. And, I mean, I don't know. For me, it was a lot of fun.
Well, the reason I left it that way instead of chopping it up like normal was because it was in the middle of the show that we decided to take a break and come back and do it again. So if I chopped it up weird, it wouldn't have made sense. So I just thought we just kind of left it as is. It would be more natural.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of cool. I mean, it was like a little bit of a glimpse into the process and how it goes. And we did something we'd never done before where we stopped in the middle of an interview, stopped and did another interview with a different guy, and then went back to our previous interview.
Yeah, that was kind of fun.
If you didn't make it to the end of the first of two episodes with Johnny, at the end of the episode is a little sneak preview of a little quickie interview we did with a guy named Rico from a band called Ease Up.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was kind of a fun little get to know you. Basically, you got to know him, or you fans, the listeners, got to know him at the same time we did. We basically never met him, not before or anything. He just showed up, and we sat him down and started talking.
Yeah,
so
cool.
That was kind of, I think, a fun experience for me, Mike. And maybe you can talk to this a little bit too. But like in our experience with the show, we've always tried to be very well prepared. Do some research on our guests and stuff like that before they come on. And we usually know a fair bit about the people we're having on before they show up. And this experience with Rico was completely opposite of that. We didn't know him at all.
I didn't even know his name. Yeah,
like we didn't even shake hands or anything prior to him, picking up the mic. So I thought that was kind of fun because it was like, I don't know, speed dating with Hispanic rock bands. So I don't know, whatever, but it was really fun. And actually, we're going to at some point, I think, over on our little micro podcast extra, I think we're going to release just the interview with Rico as just a little bit of bonus content to put out there. You can hear it at the end of Johnny's first episode, but it's I think it stands alone too. It's just kind of a short one, so it doesn't really fit the.
I think it was like 30 minutes when it was.
Yeah, it worked out to be about 30 minutes, and so I mean, it's, I don't know, it just doesn't fit the same format as like a standard Eggs show. So I thought that might be a fun place to put it out.
Perfect.
So anyway, so watch for that at some point. And Mike's actually just learning about that now, but that's what I've been thinking about doing with it.
Well, so, I was wondering. We bounced it down separately just to have. And it's sitting there, so we just
and for diehard Eggs fans, it actually inadvertently was published at the same time as the part 2 of the OPM interview.
Did I? Oops.
No, it wasn't your fault. In fact, I had pre-set everything up to go out, and it was my intention to go and build some album artwork and everything for it, and I just never got back to it, and I forgot that it was set to go. So it just loaded out that same morning. So for a little while that morning, last Thursday when the second OPM episode came out, you could get episode 62.5, which was the interview with Rico. But I've since pulled it back, and we'll drop it out formally here in the not too distant future. So anyway, so that's kind of cool. So, so right now, Mike and I are doing this show remotely. As we mentioned, we're traveling a lot.
Yeah, and I'm in Idaho. He's in Salt Lake still. I finally got back to Idaho, which is great.
Yeah, well, and Mike has been all over the place since we went to California. We were in California for a week, and then since then, Mike's been in Washington, running around doing a bunch of stuff. Anything you'd like to talk about or share from that little venture?
Oh, too much. After LA, I flew into Chelan and DJ'd a wedding. It was awesome. Then I went down to Portland and played down there for a day. The next day, I drove up to Seattle and played in Bellevue that afternoon. And then I had a week to kill, so I just went up to Anacortes and hung out with friends.
Nice.
Yeah, other than the fact that I think all my friends think I'm homeless. I'm not. It's okay. Don't worry.
You're going to be okay. That's funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Mike's been all over the place in the Great Northwest. I have not been traveling as much, but I've been very head down on a bunch of projects that I'm working on, sort of evolving my business, largely based on the advice of a couple of the CEOs you'll hear on this episode, as well as a couple. If you go back and listen to the Christo episode, for example, there were a lot of little nuggets that I was able to pull out of there that sort of motivated me to evolve my business. And so I'm working on doing that now, and it's a little bit of a challenge. I would like to come up with a way to sort of document how I'm doing, what I'm doing, all that kind of stuff, just to make something practical that could be shared with other people, just because I think it's important, or at least to me it's important, that people who listen to this podcast not just hear these guys come on the show, but maybe either in their own life implement some of the things they've learned from our guests, or maybe show how they're doing it. And so,
the thing is,
in effort to practice what I'm preaching, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, the thing that's neat about what we're doing versus we're going and we're getting these interviews and we're picking the nuggets that are good and then the stuff that apply to us, and then we're applying them in our own projects. Like my project, your project, everything that we're doing. It's nice to kind of talk to people like this and learn from them. So
I think that's kind of the point, right? I mean, when Mike and I started this show, I mean, in large part, we believed that it was about, and don't let me speak for you, Mike, if you don't agree with this, but a large part of the focus was sort of initially, let's put this message out into the world. Basically, we're generating content, to help us, to drive business, to do whatever. But basically the concept was we were going to be the source and we were going to push out content. And what the show has evolved into, after a handful of aha moments and a couple of great experiences, for me anyway, it's really about sharing the story of other people through our platform. If you go back and listen to some of those early episodes, and we've actually been told by people, you can take those down. but but we've left up all those old episodes, maybe 1 through 10, that we were still getting our sea legs and figuring out what we were doing, and we were
We're
doing a
still
lot of
doing
research.
We're still
and reading,
figuring out what we're doing, but I mean,
yeah, I mean,
it
we're
was
getting better.
very obvious back then. So
yeah, and I mean, we would put together scripts, and we would read the top 10 things and then talk a little bit about those
we
things.
would like research an idea that we like, well, what about work-life balance? Then we'd try and find a bunch of articles about that, and it's better to just get it from the horse's mouth and ask someone about it. Like, what did you do? That's my opinion,
so,
anyways.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of, if you go back and listen to those episodes, it was clear that what we were trying to do was sort of push a message out. And as we've gone on to interview more people, more prominent people who have, to keep it in the theme of the show, have moved their eggs maybe further than other people. For me, it's become a lot more about sharing their story and then sort of applying it. And, personally, I've grown quite a bit from, just from the benefit of having talked to a few of these people. And so I am excited to share this with you guys, with the listeners, because I think most of these guys warrant going back and listening to the whole episode, but maybe having this little teaser will help you out.
Yeah. So who do we have up first?
So we're going to kick this thing off with one of the first sort of like, I guess, CEO types that we ever had on. We've had, a number of guys who own their own little design shops or whatever, but this guy's a legitimate CEO and businessman. He's based here in Salt Lake City. He was the CEO of a company called Wealth Counsel for a long time, but after being diagnosed with Parkinson's back in 2015, he chose to take his energy and sort of redirect it into consulting and coaching small businesses and entrepreneurs, helping them to solve their problems and grow their companies through a company he created called the X Group. So, and then he's also gone on and created a podcast called Seeking Excellence, where he can share this information sort of openly. And he does interviews with a lot of business leaders and thought leaders and stuff, and really good show. So anyway, his name is Brett Pinniger. He's the founder of X Group. And as I mentioned, he was one of our very first CEO types, and actually sort of began the pursuit of other CEO types.
Yeah, it was actually kind of unique because he reached out to us, which was different.
That was actually kind of a milestone too, I believe, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I believe he was the first guy to actually reach out to us about being on the show. Yeah. Which for me generated a bunch of warm fuzzies, because like, I know, hey, right? Somebody's actually hearing this thing and they actually want to come on.
Yeah, that was weird to me. Yep. It's weird to me too to go and have people talk about some of our episodes and bring them up, like, oh yeah, you can actually listen to that. You're right.
Yeah, and since then we've actually been pretty lucky. We've had a couple other people reach out and show interest in being on the show or offer to help out the show. And so it's been it's very cool, and I'm very excited to see it starting to gather some steam, because Mike and I have been working really hard on this for a year and a half now. Well, maybe not a year and a half, a year and some change anyway. And
it's coming up on it,
and it makes me really happy to sort of see it, gathering some steam. So
yeah, it's like the rock rolling downhill. It's just picking up speed. It's awesome.
Yep. So. It's great. Really exciting stuff. So anyway, without any further ado, check out our first guest, Brett Pinniger. He's the founder of X Group and host of the podcast Seeking Excellence.
The one thing that has changed, and it's pretty profound when you think about it, it's that it used to be in the old days, in the 70s and even into the 80s, the companies had all the power. They sold their product. There weren't many options in the marketplace. You got what you got, and you didn't throw a fit. I mean, it's just, that's
what was available.
That was
that's
available.
What you get.
That's what you got. And then in the 80s, there started to get this mode where customers, either through mass customization that was occurring in Asia or through the emergence of online shopping and review sites, customers gained a lot more power. They began to market to customers one-to-one. Customers began speaking back to the company, and there was a proliferation of products that were available through places like Amazon and other places that really changed that dynamic. And that's good for business. I think that's good for the consumer. More recently, there's been an additional change that I've observed, which is that the workforce, people that work for companies, have also gained power.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just a millennial issue, but I mean, there's this great quote that I read about a guy who was new leader telling his team, "Here are my expectations of you." And then at the end of the discussion, the fellow asked, "Do you have any questions for me?" And somebody stood up and said, "Well, do you know what our expectations are for you?"
Turned it around on him.
That's right. And I think so that there's a little more of a democratic view of leadership, and that you can't just view it as I'm in control and you do what I say.
Yeah.
It's a much more collaborative environment.
Which is a good thing.
No, it's a phenomenal thing.
Yeah.
If you're prepared for it. And if you're an old school leader, it's going to chafe and feel very, very painful. But those that can coach and can collaborate, the sky's the limits in terms of what the possibilities are.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting perspective, because it's the same in every field, I guess. I'm seeing these same types of things coming around, where the expectations of the customer are really steering, or of the employees, are steering even what we're doing in terms of marketing decisions and things like that. It's so much is happening inside the company before it ever gets out that it's really interesting. So in Boston, when do you transition into CEO mode? Like, what are the jobs in between?
So consultant in Boston for 7 years, moved to DC to work for a software company, was there for just a year or two. There was some...
What time frame was that?
This would have been 1997.
So that was like the advent of JavaScript.
That's right.
JavaScript was in 96 when it came out, I think. So
and we were doing some really crazy sort of development for business simulations. Like, imagine you take any of the modern day business games or adventure games, and we were doing it for business.
Oh.
A little early, a little before our time, and didn't last long there. There was a sort of a fraudulent CEO that stole some money from the company, and so we decided to move on.
Probably good call.
Yeah, probably the right call.
And so I did a little bit of consulting again after that, just trying to figure out what was really next, because consulting is kind of this default position. It's something I know and I'm very comfortable with. Mm-hmm. But a buddy of mine came along in 1998 and said, "We've got a software company we'd love to invest in, but we need somebody to run it. And we really want somebody to come in and run it that we have confidence in." And I'd known him for a long time. And so we made the choice to move to DC and to get involved with the software company called Acopia. And it was one of the first open source e-commerce platforms. So we were delivering an e-commerce platform that was entirely open source, so you didn't pay for it.
Huh.
The only way we made money was by providing services around it.
Sure.
And in much the way with Red Hat Linux or other things.
Well, and that's a pretty revolutionary model for the time, too.
It was. We were on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge.
Yeah, I mean, folks are doing that now, but
That's right.
I mean, that was a pretty radical move back then.
It was indeed, but it was exciting because we were really setting the stage for what was possible. And in the period of, we really got ramped up in April of 1999, and by November of 1999, we had 60 employees.
Oh, wow.
So we were just really cranking. But the stock market was collapsing and funding was drying up, and we needed more funding to grow or even just to maintain our ability to payroll that we had. And so it was late that year, and there was an additional funder that was going to come in. And I got a call the day after Christmas and said, "I'm so sorry, but I just can't do it. I'd love to do it. Great business, but just the market is just not going to allow me to make it happen." And we thought that was it. And I remember thinking, is this really it? Are we done? Or is there a way forward? And I don't know, somewhere deep inside of me, I kind of said, you know what, I'm not done. I'm not ready to give up. And so we made some calls the next day. And I called a buddy of mine who was the CFO at Red Hat Software. And I said, "Kevin, if you're interested in what we're doing here, now is the time." And he said, "We are." And we had closed the deal by the third week in January of 2000 that was really good for the owners and really good for the employees.
Oh, wow.
And I think that, for me, is one of the things that I'm most proud of, is we didn't give up.
Yeah, it's a real lesson.
We saved the employees, and we made some money.
Yeah, it's a real lesson in perseverance, right? Because, I mean, I think a lot of people would be quick to throw in the hat or, sort of, I guess, fall on their sword or feel some level of shame or something because it's not going to work out. And I think that, really speaks to your character that you would sort of push forward. On that note, in your in a webinar of yours that we saw on the website, you talk a little bit about sort of this characteristic, this idea of the creator versus the reactor mindset. I've always sort of advocated for this too, this idea of not being a victim. But I wondered if maybe you could talk about this subject and maybe where that came from too, because I sort of feel like not everybody's got it, right? That's kind of maybe it's an inborn characteristic where you feel that way just from the jump, or maybe it was something fostered, through good parenting or something. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and then maybe go into a little bit of the, difference between a creator and a reactor and where you think that?
Well, and maybe even the difference between a creative role as a CEO versus, a designer or something like that, because you kind of have to think in a different mindset altogether.
You do. So it started reading a book I found on my dad's shelf when I was a kid. It was by James Allen, and it's As a Man Thinketh.
Okay.
And it's all about this notion that our thoughts drive what we do and what we say. And if we are troubled by what we say and do, then you should look to what you're thinking. And that our thoughts are always the sort of, they come before what we say and we do. And so that kind of got me interested in the way the mind works. And just as somebody who's naturally interested in science and things like that, I began to study more and more. And I remember meeting with, I read a book by Carol Dweck called Mindsets that really captured this idea that below our thoughts, if our thoughts kind of are our conscious mind, what we think, we have feelings that occur in our subconscious: anger, happiness, frustration, contempt, all these feelings here. And that what I learned from that for other books is that those feelings are basically the way the limbic brain, or the reptilian brain that we have, communicates with our prefrontal cortex. And the notion is that when my expectations aren't met, that I'm likely to have an emotional response.
Okay.
And so that emotional response means that I'm angry because my expectation wasn't delivered. And so then I get this angry feeling that then causes me to lash out at the person that you didn't meet my expectations. It's kind of what it tends to come down to. But that expectation is your mindset. You have a belief, this is the way the world works. Like, I could go over and turn that light switch off, and I have a belief that it's going to turn it off. I may also have a belief, like a mindset, that would be that for me to win, you've got to lose. That life's a zero-sum game, and that
you mentioned that.
The way I play the game is I win, you lose, and it's just fine. There are other people that have a mindset, and this is my mindset, which is there is plenty and to spare, that there's a life, the world of abundance. So that's one kind of mindset that people can have. But another mindset that comes back to the creator versus reactor is that some people believe that there is no space between what happens to them and their reaction to it. That if you were to punch me in the nose, my only option is to punch you back. Okay? And that's just, there is no space for me to actually process what to do. And that may be a little bit of a sort of a severe example. It may be that if somebody gets upset at me, I need to get upset at them. Or if somebody throws me under the bus, I throw them under the bus back. But what we learned from our mindsets is that there's actually a space between what happens to us and our response. And if you believe that you can respond differently than you were reacted to, then you have the ability to create the future you want. And there's a guy named Viktor Frankl that wrote Man's Search for Meaning that talked about his experience in Nazi Germany and being in the concentration camps, where he realized that he had control over one thing, and that was his ability to choose how he responded to what happened to him. And he would attribute that to at least a significant part of why he survived.
Yeah.
And so
I think a
lot
of it's mental, that's for sure.
It is certainly mental. And so this ability to create your future, if only it is to create your response to whatever happens to you, is an incredibly powerful mindset. And it's one that's easy when life's good. I mean, I think we're all sitting around this table, life's pretty good, we can create the future, life's good. But it's when we're under stress or we're under pressure that our mindsets are most obvious.
Yeah.
And so
very true.
Helping executives and business leaders create the space in their mind so that they don't initially react, but they process and then react, allows them to make much better business decisions.
Sure.
And to treat people with more respect. So if I'm a CEO now and somebody walks into my office and says, boy, you're just a jerk and I can't believe what you did and da-da-da-da-da, I can either say, get out of here, which would be the reactor response, or I could say, what happened? What's going on? Even though they're sort of attacking me, if I have the space to say, maybe this person just had a bad day.
Right.
Maybe somebody else said something to this person that is maybe a little off base and they're concerned by. I'm going to find out. And so creating and developing that mindset is really central to, I think, anybody's ability to get the most out of life, to create the future they want, to become what they want to become, and to be their best self. And if you're stuck in a reactor mode, it is really hard to get out of your own way.
It seems like in your coaching and the work that you do with businesses, entrepreneurs, and youth especially, this would have to be kind of a foundational thing that you would change, like from the very jump, that you might work with them on developing sort of this understanding that there is this space in between. How do you, I mean, can you go into it all, like how you foster this new belief structure in a human being? Because it seems like folks could be kind of, I don't know, hard nuts to crack sometimes. So especially if you're working with, I don't know, an experienced CEO or somebody like that who's, handled business one way for so long, it seems like maybe it's more in stone than a pliable young, 20-something right out of college.
I certainly think that's partially true. I think that the common trait that allows this to occur is somebody who is unhappy with the way things are going today. If they're frustrated by their current approach, it's not working, there is somehow, they're getting a lot of negative feedback at work, or as a kid, they're not having the opportunities they want to have. So there's a humility, a willingness to sort of say, boy, what I'm doing today isn't working. And if I feel like what I'm doing today works, I don't care if you're 10, 20, or 50, it's going to be hard to want to do this. So there's got to be this sense of, I'm unhappy with my current situation, or I desire more than I'm getting. But if you get to that point, then it's pretty straightforward. I mean, the first step is to identify those moments when you're triggered, when you're like, ugh, when you feel that emotion. And so instead of going, oh, I'm angry, I shouldn't be angry, go, oh, I'm angry, and that's telling me that I have an expectation that's not being met. What is that expectation? So all of a sudden we become reflective instead of just responsive to that. But the key is to identify the trigger. So you've got to be good enough to say, I'm now getting angry, I feel myself getting revved up. What do I need to do to then back away from that and then say, what's the underlying belief that I have that's causing me to get angry?
I keep thinking of road rage.
Yeah.
Every time I'm thinking the dude with the brights on behind me that's been following me for 20 miles. And
I just spent a week in New York where everybody's honking over every little thing. And so yeah, I can completely understand. And these are all the folks that are operating on the primal part of their brain. They're not doing this piece. So I guess, it sounds to me then maybe it's like you at least in your practice or in your training up of a potential CEO or a potential business person, that it's really more about, here, I'm going to lay out this is how you change your mindset. These are the sort of things you need to be able to do to get past this hurdle in your development. But it's kind of on that person to do the reps. Like, it sounds like it's really just kind of, part of it is, I guess you have to agree with it, but some of it's just got to be practice, right?
It is absolutely what I'll call deliberate practice. You need to actually intentionally go after this. And we'll actually sometimes create, in some workshops, hostile situations.
Really?
That they know they're hostile. They're not like sort of like, you have somebody crazy person walk in and get everyone revved up here. You say, all right, I'm going to start yelling at you and going to call you names. And I want you to then respond in a way that would be level-headed and thoughtful. And it's interesting in some cases how easy it is to get under somebody's skin. Mm-hmm. Even though they know it is an artificial construct, we're easily triggered, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of hot buttons I would say each industry has their own kind of unique hot buttons.
And even if you just think about it sort of globally, like in this sort of politically charged climate we have now, pretty easy, 50% of the people or more or less, will respond one way or another based on what you say. So, it would be really easy to trigger a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, you construct situations where you can do it, or you talk about what you would do when this happens. So you would say, hypothetically, when you get home and your kid's bed is not made, what are you going to do? So you think about that in advance. And so when it does happen, you go, well, I actually thought about this, and make it happen. I had a really interesting experience that really brought this to the forefront of my mind. When I was a kid, I was pulling the boat, the family water ski boat. And for whatever reason, the boat came off the trailer, or the trailer came off the hitch as I'm pulling the boat down the road. Ooh. getting ready to turn onto the freeway, and I'm looking out my window, and I see the boat and the tongue of the boat, or the front of the boat, smashing it, and sparks flying everywhere.
Had the chains hooked up at least?
Well, the chains were broken because they were rusted through, and it was bad news. So it was just floating down the road. And I look ahead, and there are these parked cars at a stoplight, and I go, holy smokes, this is going to get these
Go right into them.
So I thought, I'm going to have to turn into the boat to try and get it off the road. And thankfully, it did that without me turning into it. But anyway, it was, you can read about it on my blog. It's the boat story. And there's all in. I get to there, pull into the parking lot. The 6 or 7 cars are totally destroyed. I opened the door to this store and I said, can I use your phone? Because this is in the days before cell phone. And they said, sure. So I call my dad, and I thought, I'm just going to get ripped out here. This is going to be awful. And he said, Brett, call me when you get it all taken care of.
Really?
And
how old were you at the time?
16.
Barely had your license?
Barely had my license, like 2 months. And it was very much not said hostilely. It was just said very matter-of-factly. Figure it out. And that really stuck with me. Huh. I go, wow, that took just amazing presence for my dad to do that. So now roll the clock forward here. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. My son, just having got his license, is driving the old family Suburban. It's home for lunch during the school day. It's in the parking. It's in the driveway. I'm pulling into my car for lunch as well. Put my car in park because I can't get in because he's parked in the middle of the driveway. The reverse lights go on. The brake goes off, and he starts backing into me. So I just tap my horn, thinking, he'll stop. He doesn't stop. In fact, he accelerates.
Oh, no.
Just totally destroyed. And I thought, oh, my goodness. And my initial response was, oh, he is in so much trouble. I mean, the words flowing through my mind were not meant for the printed page. But by the time I got out of the car and he got out of the car, I realized that there was a better response than I needed to. And that flowed from that experience with my dad.
Yeah.
And so I said, Corey, I love you. I said, we'll get this all taken care of, but you need to know more than anything that I love you.
That's good.
And that came from my dad.
Mm-hmm. And
that came from the sense that I could choose my response. And I am so grateful for that experience because it could have been really ugly.
Well, yeah, I mean, the sort of the long-term relationship damage that could be done from going sideways. And saying what you're thinking at every living moment, or whatever. Not just in this situation, but in any situation.
Yep.
Sometimes saying what you think isn't necessarily the way to go. So speaking of this, taking this time and I guess working through things and overcoming, and I don't know if you want to call it seeing the bright side or whatever. Yeah. In 2014, you were diagnosed with Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. And from there, it seems like in our research of you anyway, and feel free to clarify, but in our research, it looked like that was a pretty monumental pivot for you in not just in the way that you do business, but also in the way that you see the world. Would you be willing to talk about that a little bit and just talk about sort of that transition, maybe the what life was like before to what life's become?
Well, and if you want a really in-depth, description of it, because I'm sure we won't have time. You did a whole webinar about an hour long.
I did.
That you broke down the whole journey.
Yep.
And it's a pretty interesting little webinar, and I would highly recommend you check it out. We'll definitely put it in the show notes so you guys can find it.
That'd be great. Thank you. So diagnosed with Parkinson's. Actually, I first experienced symptoms of Parkinson's in 2014. I didn't get serious enough about it to actually get a formal diagnosis until 2015. Part of that had to do with the fact that at least in Utah and in most of the United States, there wasn't a definitive test until 2015.
Well, the test, when you broke it down how they did it, that's pretty intense.
It's injecting a highly radioactive substance into your body.
You couldn't even be around kids afterwards.
Be around people. It was just grim. I felt like metal was flowing through my body.
Wow.
And then I had to sit perfectly still in something that was as claustrophobic as you could possibly imagine, with just inches, if an inch, around your head. And had to lay still there for 20 or 30 minutes. But anyway, within minutes, I knew that I had Parkinson's. And I entered a really profound depression. I mean, I just very honestly, at points in my life, have struggled with depression. It's just a part of my life. And I would say that it is part of more executives and leaders' lives than they would ever really admit.
We've really, just in the process of doing this show and working with creative folks, and I classify a lot of business executives and stuff sort of as creatives.
Sure.
we found that to be a really inherent condition of a lot of creative folks, myself included, and I know that can be a piece of the disease itself of Parkinson's, but there's also just that emotional top layer.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
you're literally putting yourself in front of everyone else to be criticized, and it's hard to do and take that criticism on a daily basis, and everyone's judging your work, everyone's and it gets, I could see how that would take its toll, and then on top of it coming down with something like Parkinson's and trying to deal with that on top of everything else, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was very hard, and I mean, me being the primary economic provider for my family, I go, what is this going to do to my ability to provide? When you talk to doctors, the progression of the disease can be very rapid or very slow. And so they're talking about the worst case where it can be very rapid. I'm going like, well, this is terrible. And this is going to ruin my life. And I'm not valuable to my family anymore. I mean, there's just lots of really negative feelings.
A lot of hard emotions to work through.
But the one thing that I had going for me is I really love to run. And I love just getting out early in the morning and just pounding the pavement.
Is that something you did before?
I did it before. I've been doing it really quite consistently since 2012. And I found that as I ran, that I felt better. And within about 8 weeks, I think I'd kind of turned the corner and felt sort of in control again and was able to function and be effective. And then as I kept running, I realized that that there were some things that were really important to me that I'd always known were important to me, but never had risen to the top of the list. And that was that it's all about relationships. It's not about success. It's not about achievement. And I know those things are important to some people. I'd rather not achieve and
but
work
have
with and have great relationships than achieve and have terrible relationships. It's just not worth it. And so what I came to realize is that for businesses or for families or for individuals, it's the people that matter, and it's the relationships you have with people. And then I realized that as a leader, that oftentimes we do things that really destroy or hamper relationships, that we're so focused on the results, we're so focused on what we're trying to accomplish, that we view people as cogs in the machine, as pawns on the chessboard, and that when we do that, we actually limit our ability to be successful. And my thinking just kept evolving and becoming clearer and clearer and clearer on this. And then I, as I'm prone to do, went out and found some research that in fact supported what I was thinking, which is that when you have an organization where you have people that feel like they're engaged and that they're cared for, that they receive good feedback, that they're given opportunities to use their talents, they're 2 or 3 times as productive as those that feel like they're just being used by the organization. And so to me, that was a very powerful insight that says not only is this the right thing to do, but it makes great business sense.
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be like a middle ground though, because you can give them all the freedom in the world, but you have to kind of coach them in the right direction.
Oh, yeah, that's true. It's true. And in fact, what's interesting is that people don't want absolute freedom. What they want is accountability for the things that they own. Don't hold me accountable for something I can't control. But if it's mine to own, then I'm absolutely willing to be accountable for this. And in fact, they want that. In fact, I call that tough love. It's this notion of love isn't about total freedom and no responsibility. Love is about freedom and responsibility. And I think that I'm not perfect at this, but it's certainly something where I realize that holding people accountable for the things that they said they would do, but they didn't, is a really important part of it. And I think that it's accountability for the work. You can't sometimes control the result. I mean, you can go out there and have a great ad campaign, for example. You think it's the most amazing thing, and it just drops dead. Yeah. And whose fault is that? Well, we tried the best we could do. So if the effort was great, and then you did the best you could do, and it didn't work out, you can still hold your head high and feel like you did good work. Where you hold people accountable is when they don't do the work. And if they didn't pay the price, they didn't do the research, they didn't do whatever needed to be done, then that's their responsibility. And so to me, that's an important part of what people want, is they want to be empowered and held accountable for their work. And then when they do a good job, tell them they've done a good job, and you appreciate them.
Well, awesome. That was Brett Pinniger from the X Group.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, sort of leading up to it, he was our first CEO guy, and for me, really an influential guy. I'd hope to maybe do some more, maybe even meet with him for some coaching and some things like that at some point, which hasn't happened yet. But I was really grateful for Brett and happy he was willing to share his time with us. He had a really great story.
Yeah, it was really good advice. Was happy and excited to do that episode. But
yeah.
Next we have Ryan Carson. He's the CEO of Team Treehouse. Ryan is an amazing guy. He's very generous with his time. He gave us an hour to, pretty much talk about everything, like starting his platform, Team Treehouse, how he got it up to 200,000 students across the world, what it's like to build a professional network, and just a really cool conversation. I think we met him because I've been working on some coding projects myself and learning, and I use his platform, and I took a picture of, something I was studying and hashtag Team Treehouse, and he liked it. And so I just sent him a message. Hey, what's up?
So and what's great about that, I mean, just that willingness to make that connection and his willingness to sort of, like what you had posted or whatever, led to a conversation. And I would say that Ryan has probably been one of the more influential guys, at least in my personal life, that we've had on the show. For some of the sort of the life hacks and the schedule, sort of schedule of, I don't know, his daily operation. For me, sort of influenced the way that I was doing business at the time. It changed my morning schedule to become much earlier than it used to be.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm going to bed now, and he sends me messages, and I reply. So that's you're getting up, and I'm going to bed.
Yeah, and so anyway, Ryan was really great. He, as Mike said, he's been very generous with his time, not only on this podcast, but we've corresponded a bit by email since then. He's been an awesome ally, and I'm really grateful for having met him. So let's go ahead and roll the tape. This is Ryan Carson, CEO of Team Treehouse.
I was going through high school in, 92 to 96. And that's when the internet started to happen, like in its very formative age. So I was lucky to have a teacher. And it's funny, she was the most uncool teacher at the whole school, but she changed my life. And she, walked up to me in the hallway one day and said, have you ever tried programming? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And she said, well, it's where you tell the computer what to do. And I was like, wow, okay, that sounds fun. And she said, yeah, we have a class, you should take it. And so I tried it. It was Turbo Pascal, which is super sexy and cool. Anyway, and that was the moment, that my world was opened up.
Did it just kind of click for you, or?
It was sort of. I mean, it was just exciting to create something from nothing. This you have an idea, and then you kind of write this story, and then all of a sudden, the computer is doing things for you. And I'm not actually really technical or really scientific or math based or anything. I'm more creative, and that spoke to my creative side. So ignited my imagination.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I've never considered myself a mathematical whiz or the analytical type.
Right.
I feel like I'm getting that way because I'm paying more attention to it. But having you reaffirm that, saying I'm more of a creative, it actually makes me feel like I can actually do this, which is
right. Yeah, you don't need to be some math whiz. I mean, it's just a total lie, right? Everybody in technology is actually a creative, person. And so if you are listening to this and you know, are excited about technology or all these jobs that pay a bunch of money, or people are starting companies in tech, you do not have to be great at math or science. It really is just creativity. It's like writing a screenplay. And there are so many jobs and opportunities. So that's exciting.
So to sort of continue that line of thought, so you went to Colorado State, obviously being from Colorado, that seems logical.
Yeah.
And you got a degree in computer science, but this is something we've talked a little bit about on this show, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective, because basically at this point with Team Treehouse, I mean, Colorado State and any university is more or less your competitor. So I was curious what you thought about sort of the importance of a traditional education, going the route you went, versus, something online, training yourself, learning a skill. And then what you think the future of education looks like. If it's more like Treehouse, specialized resources on the web or wherever that teach specific education, or is there going to be a place for college in the future?
Right. So I think if you can go to a great college without student debt, you should do that. So if you can get into Stanford or MIT or Harvard or any of the top tier schools, and you're not going to take on student debt, do it. I think that's clearly going to be an optimal path, because the world is set up for you at that point, But the brutal truth is most people can't do that. They're going to be like me, who I'm already super privileged. I grew up in this. I'm a white man. I have all of the cards, stacked for me. But I went to Colorado State and got a computer science degree. And that it wasn't even optimal, because it turns out that once you become an adult like all of us, and you're working in the industry, you realize after that first hurdle, that first job, no one cares about your degree.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who lives here in Salt Lake. He's a senior web developer, and he was saying, once you have that 2 years experience, the paper doesn't matter anymore.
None of it matters. It's just so crazy how we're funneling kids towards this expensive kind of learning vacation. Where you rack up $30,000 to $40,000 of debt, and you become sort of an indentured servant for the rest of your life. It's kind of weird. But it angers people when I say, don't go to college. And I decided not to fight that battle. It's like, okay, if you are determined to send your kids to college, or if you are determined to go to college, or if you went to college, that's okay. But what's going to happen is, as soon as you start applying for jobs, it's going to be all about what you can do. It's going to be about your emotional intelligence. And it's going to be about stackable skills. So I think we're moving towards a model where a lot of folks are realizing that if they can create projects and build things, they can get into the door. And then after that, the college experience doesn't matter as much. And if you want that well-rounded kind of liberal arts side of education, which is really valuable, you can actually get it for free at Coursera, right? You can get a Harvard education for free at Coursera. So why not do that, but then pick up the trade skills that you need to do your job and get paid, at a school like Treehouse or something like that. So I think that's kind of where we're moving.
I'm happy to hear you say that, because I kind of went down a similar path. I studied audio engineering at a community college in Seattle, and I enjoyed it, but I racked up $20,000 in debt, and I haven't found a job in the industry yet.
And that's the normal story. Like, it's you and millions of other people. And I actually did the math on this. So I'm a nerdy kind of finance closet guy where my dad was a financial planner. So I love nerding out about retirement savings and stuff like that. So I thought, I want to actually run the math on this and figure out what happens to somebody if they go the college route or they don't. And what happens to their total net worth throughout their life. And it's pretty basic. So say that you have Billy. Billy goes to college, accrues 30 to 40 grand of debt, and then he gets a job. And then you have, Tamiqua, who she gets a job straight out of high school. what happens to their net worth. Because Billy, the college grad, will start making more money right out of college, yes, but he also has 30 to 40 grand of debt. So
that he's going to have to
he has to pay off. And so Billy is actually not going to save into his 401k because it's $300 to $400 is the typical monthly student debt repayment. Mm-hmm. And that's enough money for almost all of us that you're going to not also save into a 401k. Right.
Yeah.
It's just too much. It's like, gosh, I just need to pay down my student debt and then the rest I can survive on. So Billy is making more money when he starts, but he's not saving for retirement. And Tamiqua is making money right out of high school. Now she's making less money. She may be able to get a job that pays her $50,000 a year as a junior developer. But she is going to immediately start saving into her 401k, and she's also her salary is going to also start climbing. And so eventually Billy and Tamiqua will make the same salary, but she will have been earning for 4 years when he's going to college, and she would have been saving to her 401k from the beginning. And I'm assuming Billy is not going to pay into his 401k until he's about 40, because that's typically what happens. People don't pay off their student debt till they're 40. So the lifetime difference in how much money they will make is $2 million.
Wow. That's just the interest working for them instead of against them.
Right. It's so simple. Like this is math, based on real life. And yet we're telling all of our kids that you should get a degree because it's the way to be happy. And it's just not true anymore.
Yeah. The funny part for me is when I was in college, they would actually send me home and have me study online to,
Right.
Yeah. It's like, to be honest with you, I didn't even get my degree. I didn't finish it. I'm like a few credits short. And the reason I didn't is because I figured out I could do it on my own. Why pay the bill?
It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't want anyone who's attached to, colleges, who works at colleges, they're all wonderful people. I mean, you have hardworking teachers.
Oh, yeah. Some of the people I met in college are going to be my best friends for life.
Right.
They're great connections that I'll have the rest of my life, which is awesome.
So they're...
but at the same time, you got to weigh it out. You got to determine if the education that you're getting is worth the expense, and it's
right. It's usually not. So I don't want anyone to hear us saying all of you all in working at colleges or part of that system are bad or evil. You're not. It's just the system hasn't adapted.
Yeah.
So there's a better way. And so let's go positive. Okay. So, there is a better way, whether it's Treehouse or anything else. It turns out you can get the skills you need to get the high paying job, for a fraction of the price in a fraction of the time while you live your life instead of, having to pause it. So we're moving to a good place. And I think the world, it unlocks all sorts of possibilities for folks who were locked out of tech before. So we're moving to a cool place.
Yeah, that's awesome. So coming out of Colorado State, can you tell us a little bit about your first gig after college?
Yeah. So I grew up, my whole life in Colorado, and I thought, I should go live somewhere else because who knows what I don't know. And, I'm surrounded by people that believe the same thing I do. So let's just go somewhere else and see what happens. So I watched a film, the best movie ever made, called Notting Hill. Nice. So if you're not a romantic comedy fan, it's basically
is this where your love for the British began, or is that as a result of marrying a British woman?
I think it's a mix of the two, maybe. Jill will not want to hear that, my wife. But, so I just thought, England looks fun, and it looks like Hugh Grant's having fun over there. So maybe I'll move there and see what happens. And turns out that was really naive. That's like moving to New York after you've seen, Jay-Z and how his life is amazing there.
That's not how it works out for every New Yorker.
Right. I'm not going to live like Jay-Z. What's going on? And so moved to England, and actually a recruiter got me my first job because I thought, I don't know how things work over here. Let's just pay a recruiter to get me a job. And so my first job was for a small web development company in Cambridge. And it was hilarious because they said, oh, okay, I guess you know how to code, so we're going to hire you. But you're going to do this thing you've never done before. I learned C++ and all these advanced things. And they said, you're going to learn this weird language called Cold Fusion. And there you go. Have fun. So,
alrighty. Okay.
Right. All right. I can do that. And so that's when it struck me, what the heck just happened? You know, my parents just shelled out like $40,000 for this degree. And I just showed up at this job and they told me I didn't need any of it. As long as I knew how to code, I could do the job. So that's when the seed of Treehouse was planted, you know, that something's wrong. I don't know what's going on here, but I think something's really messed up. And so, then fast forward 10 years and I started Treehouse to try to solve that problem.
Huh.
So can we talk a little bit about sort of your first product, your first app? So before you got into Treehouse, you did other things. Can you talk a little bit about that path?
Yeah, you bet.
Sort of, so obviously you must have had sort of that entrepreneurial bug, and at some point you transitioned from working for someone to working for yourself.
Yep. Yeah.
That whole process. Can you just talk a little bit about that move and that shift?
You bet. I'll walk you through it. So I actually wasn't one of those kids that, opened up a lemonade stand, to make money, and I didn't sell baseball cards, or didn't, try to make a profit on selling candy in the schoolyard. I was never that person. So what happened, and I want to encourage people listening, like if you don't feel like you're some crazy entrepreneur, who's, die hard, then that's okay, because that's the way I was. What happened to me is I was working at a web design company in London, and my boss was kind of a dick.
Okay.
And he was kind of mean, and he just, he kind of took advantage of all of us. We were working really hard, building all this stuff for the clients, and we were just, there was no thanks or no gratitude or no support. And I ended up kind of thinking, gosh, this person is, driving really expensive sports cars and, ironically playing golf with Hugh Grant. So seriously, that's one of his life's weird twists. And I just thought, this is just, I don't get it. What he does doesn't look that hard. We're doing all the work. I bet I could build a product or do something and make a living. How hard can it be? And I was really motivated by a guy named Jason Fried, who runs a company called Basecamp. And at the time it was called 37 Signals. And they were blogging a lot about how they had built, a software as a service, recurring revenue product on the side. And it eventually grew and became, enough to support all of them. And I thought, I know how to code. I bet I can, build an app that solves a problem that pays me enough to, make it on my own. How hard can it be? And so I just started kind of working at, nights and weekends. I didn't have kids. Jill and I weren't married yet, so I just had a ton of free time. And so I looked for a problem that I could solve. And back in 2000, what was this? 2003, you couldn't send large files over email.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember? Literally, you couldn't send anything over like 2 megs. And so I worked in this design studio. We had to send these large Photoshop files to our clients to get approval. And we couldn't do it. And so I thought, I bet I can solve that problem. So I just started, digging around on the internet, started reading books about how to make a web app, and built this really kind of clunky solution. And then at some point I thought, what, I'm going to go see if I can get anyone to pay me for this thing. So I started talking to a couple friends who had this problem. They owned web design studios. And finally I got one guy to pay me £3,000 to install this kind of software for them at their company. And as soon as I did that and he gave me the check, I quit my job. I was
Wow.
like, I'm out.
That's crazy.
And that 3,000 pounds covered rent in London for 1 month.
Right. It was right. It was like, I could survive, for a month, and let's just do it. And so at that moment, I told Jill, I'm going to quit, and then we also decided, let's get married. So did it all at the same time, quit my job, got married, and then started this company, which eventually failed. So that was fun. And
that was called Flight Deck.
Flight Deck. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that, I think you sort of hit on a topic that I wanted to get into a little bit with you. So I think, especially now in this day and age, makes me sound old, but nowadays with social media and everything, it's really easy to focus on the success. You mentioned, how Jay-Z is living in New York, so I think it's really easy for people to get envious of folks who are doing well, who've accomplished something, like yourself. And I think most of the people don't know the backstory or don't care to find it out. They don't investigate the trials and tribulations it takes before actually achieving success.
Right.
Most of what seems like an overnight success isn't. And so I wondered if you would talk about your experience with failure, and sort of how it helped you along the way. What sort of, lessons you could learn and how it might have steered you.
Yeah, boy.
It's a big question, I know.
There is. No, it's a good question because we all are tempted to believe that successful folks were always successful or always knew they were going to be successful or always knew how to be successful. And it just isn't true. And so what happened to me is, I saw the folks at 37 Signals and Basecamp succeeding. I knew it wasn't going to be easy because they were pretty honest about that. But I thought, okay, we're going to launch this product called Flight Deck. I'm going to sell it to companies who are trying to send large files, and it's all going to be great. We're going to be millionaires. And then what I realized is, I wasn't quite sure how to price it or market it or sell it. I was great at being a developer and building the thing, but I didn't know how to sell it or market it. So I sort of, I felt like I was walking around in the dark, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And it was tough.
Well, you talked about having some naive optimism in an interview that I was watching. And I have a lot of the same kind of tendencies. I'll jump off the cliff without looking down first and then realize what I'm jumping into and try and climb back out.
Right. Well, I guess I need to build wings before we crash. And it's good. I would have never started any of these things if I knew how hard it was going to be, but I started it. And I think I would encourage everyone listening not to overthink it. If you have your basic needs met, you've got enough money to eat and you've got a roof over your head. Okay, the worst that can happen is you could go back and do your old job. So that's the mentality I had and started to try to sell this thing. And what ended up happening is I didn't know how to do sales and marketing, business to business. So this product really was something that a business needed to buy, not a consumer. And I didn't really know how to do that. I had never done sales. The one time in my life when I tried to do sales was in college, and I remember cold calling people, and I quit after one phone call where this guy just said, "Is this a sales call?" And I was like, "Yes." and he said, "F you," and I was like, "Okay, I don't like sales. I don't want to do that anymore." So I thought, I'm bad at sales. I don't want to do that. And so what slowly happened is I sold, maybe one deal, and then it would be weeks and weeks until the next one. And eventually one day, I remember it was lunchtime, and I worked from home by myself in our kind of attic, a guy with a computer in an attic. And I just remember thinking, okay, it's lunchtime. I'm going to go eat. So I went downstairs to eat, and I thought, maybe I'll just watch The Matrix, just for, I'll just take like a little break, and then I'll get back to work. And then after I did that, I realized, wow, okay, something's really wrong here. I'm avoiding working. I think I'm depressed. I don't know how to solve this, and I'm not sure I'm going to figure it out. it was a dark place to be, you know, alone, trying to figure out how to sell something, it not working. I remember later that night, I just sat down with Jill and I was like, you know, I showed you all those spreadsheets where, you know, the graphs are going up and to the right and we were going to, you know, make a ton of money and everything was going to be great. I don't think it's going to happen. She was, you know, loving and kind. And she's like, well, okay, you know, let's figure it out. Like, what do you want to do? And what's next? And so thankfully I had someone there to support me, you know, and help me through that. And so we pivoted to something else, you know, and I was like, wow, I don't want to go get a job yet, you know, and you've got a job, so you're paying our mortgage. So that's great. And, I realized, well, what I'm really passionate about is helping people. There's something deep inside me that makes me happy. It's not necessarily money. It's something else. And so, well, why don't we teach people how to code? Because if they can code, they can get a job. And so we booted that idea up, and it was really simple and really, you know, basic. We found a smart person, had them teach a class in person, and we sold 30 tickets. And we just tried our first one in London, you know, emailed all of our friends, and it sold out. We had 30 people show up. And that was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's something here. So totally failed at the first company, and then, you know, figured out, well, I'm passionate about this thing. Let's try it. And it worked. So it's definitely not a straight line, you know, up and to the right.
Huh. That's crazy. Okay, let's take a step back. Let's talk about the process of launching your first app. So, like, tell us about maybe some hurdles you had to overcome, such as, I don't know, traffic, scaling for the site, expenses you didn't expect, hiring your first employee, all that fun stuff that, you know, comes with the territory.
Yeah, you bet. So what we did is, once we started making enough money with that kind of in-person training company, what we decided to do was try to figure out if we could scale it by taking it online. You know, maybe we can help more people if we do this online. So the way we did that was, I hired a developer actually to build the first version of Treehouse, and used the designer that we were already working with at my previous company. And what's interesting is, I mean, looking back, everything was built in kind of like cardboard. You know, it was not, you know, some, you know, massively powerful, stable, you know, platform. It really was just pieces of cardboard kind of put together, and, you know, with a veneer of, you know, design on top, not because we didn't want to be quality, but just because we couldn't really afford more than that. And we didn't know it was going to work. So a lot of what we did is we built on, you know, we used, I think it was, something like Chargeify to do the recurring billing, or maybe it was called Recurly. There's basically early on we used a service to do the recurring billing for us, you know, because that's hard. You don't want to mess with that. I mean, now you can use Stripe or Braintree or any kind of solution like that. So that worked. And then, you know, we tried to figure out, how do you do video and how do you host it, and how do you deal with stuff, you know, falling over when there's too much traffic. And the truth is, it was messy. And some of it didn't work right. And we did have bugs and errors and problems. And, you know, looking back, it was a mess. You know, I think that's what everyone should hear about all this, is that no matter what your idea is and how hard you work at building it, nothing will go to plan. And that's okay. It's better just to accept it and try to survive. And then over time, you can make the platform more solid and more stable, and you can build out your systems and processes. You can fix all that later, but just get it out there and start learning is the key.
So what are your thoughts on sort of the mentality of doing an MVP?
Oh, boy.
I've seen some stuff recently. Yeah, I've been reading. We did a couple app launches, me and some of our team, and I mean nothing major, nothing that ever really went anywhere. But they were done as part of the like startup weekend programs.
Yeah,
and the purpose of startup weekend is to get that MVP over the course of the weekend. And I don't know, I would just be curious what your thoughts are on that. Just because I've been hearing sort of differing opinions lately.
Yeah, I think you have to do an MVP, a minimum viable product, because the problem is you overthink it otherwise. So what we do still now is we build in cardboard and we test and then we build, in concrete after that. So a good example is this new product we have called Talent Path. So I had the realization, we are hiring mostly white males at Treehouse, even though I believe in diversity, even though I know it's the right thing to do to, hire people of different colors and genders and points of view. For some reason, I'm not doing it. Like, what is going on here? So I dug into it, and it turns out, that we needed to change a lot of things at Treehouse. So what we started to do is we partnered with the Boys and Girls Club, and we said, can you please give the message to your amazing community that Treehouse wants to invest in them and needs them, and we'll hire them as apprentices. We don't require a college degree. We will invest in you. So they did that, and we had this amazing group of folks come out of the Boys and Girls Club, out of high school. And then we invested in them by giving them access to our tech degree, which is our online boot camp. And we mentored them. Boys and Girls Club mentored them. And then we hired them as apprentices. And I want to emphasize the reason why I'm talking about this as an MVP is because I was basically building this product live, for us.
Just trying it out. Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just start working on it. And, let's put the pieces together,
First off, props on going to the Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
It's been eye-opening.
I've heard amazing things.
I mean, it's amazing. It is mind-boggling. And this is why, again, I get kind of emotional about college and requiring people to go to college and all this stuff is, there's a huge group of folks that are never going to study computer science, because no one in computer science looks like them. No one's telling them to do that. I was lucky to have a teacher who said, you should learn programming, and because Bill Gates was white, and a billionaire, I could look up and say, oh, he's like me, I can be like him. But if you're black or if you're Latinx, there's no one like you in tech that you can see. So you're never going to choose it, right? But you have all this potential, right? So working at the Boys and Girls Club has been mind-blowing because the apprentices that are coming out of there are, gritty and hardworking and friendly and kind, and intelligent, as you would expect. But they didn't have that chance. So circling back to the MVP, it was like, well, okay, let's see if we can build this new talent pipeline for ourselves and let's figure it out. And it worked. And we realized, oh my gosh, this is actually a new path to these high paying jobs. And so then I started telling my friends about it. I have a friend who's a VP of engineering at MailChimp. And I said, hey, I know that you're trying to hire diverse talent. We basically worked really hard for a year at Treehouse to do this for ourselves. And it crazily, it works. And he's like, I want to install that. And so it was like, oh my gosh, well, it's an MVP. Like, it's not even really a thing. Let's figure it out together. So then we started, putting some concrete foundations into that and formalizing our process and hiring people, and doing things. So what we did first is figure out how to build the solution to a problem that we understood, or we didn't understand, but we wanted to fix. And then once it worked, then we started building, all of the strong foundation to create a solution for other companies. And it turns out, if you take that model of building an MVP and then iterating on it, that's pretty much what we've done the whole time at Treehouse. And I don't really know if there's another way to do it. Otherwise, you risk, wasting a huge amount of money and time building something that you think should work, and it turns out no one wants it or it doesn't work. And then then you're in a bad spot.
Yeah. So in my situation, I've been working on a project for a long time now, and I keep finding things that I think have to be in the initial launch. Or, like the client or the person won't appreciate the actual software, And so it's hard for me to separate and decide, hey, I want this.
Right.
And I don't want that. And what's phase one? What's phase two? What can I hold back? It's just, it's so difficult. I know. It's crazy.
It is. It's hard. That is normal. And nothing wrong with you. That's the normal way to think about it. And what I'm trying to do in general, though, is, I think the reason why this is hard for people is because it feels like you're being dishonest if you are kind of going to, other people and saying, here's a solution to a problem you have. And if you don't feel like you've already built everything they need, then you're somehow being dishonest. But that's not really what's happening. Really what a better way to look at it is approach folks and say, tell me about some of your problems, and then they'll say, I have XYZ problems. And then if you say, well, if we had a solution that solved those problems, would you prioritize, using them to solve the problem? Yeah, we do that. Well, how much would you pay to do that? We'll pay $1,000 to solve that problem. Okay. Do you have the budget? Yeah, we have the budget. And then you can say, well, would you partner with me? We actually are trying to build that. And, we would love to have you as a customer, and we'd love to learn with you and solve that problem for you. Man, that works. And then everybody wins. They're basically funding the development of your product because it solves a real problem, versus you kind of building this perfect shiny box, but not actually going to real people and asking them to pay you to use it. And I've made that mistake. Trust me. I've learned the hard way. So.
Yeah, that was Ryan Carson. Amazing episode, amazing person. I learned so much from him, like seriously.
Yeah, I've got to say, it's probably one of my favorite, and well, maybe favorite's the wrong word, but he was definitely one of the most influential guests that we've had so far. And we've had a few that have been very good. But the conversation we had with Ryan was really influential for me. It changed the way I was doing things and doing business and living life and a lot of things. And I sort of, have a lot to thank him for. He's also been, as Mike mentioned before the clip, he was very generous with his time. And, we've corresponded a little bit by email back and forth since the show. And he couldn't be more pleasant. He's awesome.
Yeah, he actually came on and checked out my project I'm working on.
Yeah, so that's right. While we were in California, you had a call with him, and he was willing to sort of review your project and everything. And
yeah, it's kind of cool.
Again, just super generous with his time. He has lots going on, and the fact that he's willing to make time for others is, speaks truly to his character.
Yeah. So once again, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks so much, man.
Who do we got next?
So the next one is a friend of mine and really talented film producer. His name's Scott Halford. He's the CEO at Foresight Studios. Foresight is a Utah-based company that specializes in live performance, live streaming, motion graphics, photography, all that good stuff. The conversation we had with him, I thought, was going to circle more around what he does for a living, the video work and stuff like that. But actually, we got pretty heavy into, running your own business talk. getting things started, trying to develop a personal brand and reputation, knowing your value and how to charge for your work, all things that are sort of hot buttons for creatives. So, our conversation with him far exceeded expectation.
Yeah, it was an amazing discussion. He actually opened his office to us, and we kind of just showed up there and did it there. And one thing I didn't know about him that was cool is he ran a film festival for a long time. And that, just setting something like that up, the process behind putting something like that together is really unique. And it was fun talking about.
Yeah, really cool. And yeah, I'd worked with the guy for 5 or 6 years, and a lot of stories and things that I didn't know about him either that were very interesting. So I think you'll enjoy it. There were a lot of good nuggets in there, and I think you'll definitely get some value out of listening to this clip and ultimately going back and listening to his full episode when you get a moment. So with that, here is Scott Halford, CEO of Foresight Studios.
I would talk to them on the phone. They'd say, yeah, we'll meet you. And then as soon as they met me and saw how old I was, their first question out of their mouth was, how old are you?
Yeah.
And the second one was always, what makes you think you can do a film festival? And then, you do the interview for the newspaper, and then they ask the same question again. They're like, okay, so no, really, I want to know for the story. Like, why, what makes you think you could do a film festival as a 24-year-old? And I was like, I'm in Ogden. I really love film. I really want to network in the industry, and I feel like this is a good way to do that. And there aren't any other film festivals up here, so why not do a film festival? And who cares if I'm 23 and 24?
Yeah.
So, and I don't think many people really did once they kind of got an idea of how passionate I was about it. I don't think they cared anymore, and I got a lot of support, and I did that for 9 years. So.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it's kind of interesting because as a film festival director and founder, I feel like a lot of people cared about my opinion on their films more because of that than being an award-winning filmmaker. Because I've won some awards as well. So,
you did this for 9 years in a row.
Yeah. So I did 9 years of film festival.
That says a lot right there. That's a lot of work.
I did, formed a nonprofit. It was a little film institute named after my business, Foresight, spelled Foursight is one word, a little play on the words. And in its biggest year, the film festival had 4 sites. So we had 4 simultaneous locations that we were showing films in.
That's awesome. So why'd you get out of that?
Because I got a day job, I got married, and I had kids.
Life got in the way.
And then it got to the point, where I kind of tried to go on autopilot, and the film festival suffered. And I thought, if I can't serve it well, then maybe I'll just not do it anymore.
Well, and I think that's probably a pretty mature decision, right? Because it's something that you love doing and all that, but if you can't give it the justice that or the service it deserves, then it's probably better off left alone.
I had all sorts of delusions of grandeur when it came to that film festival. I thought, we'll do the film market of Utah, turn it into that, and then we'll get distributors coming here to buy films from the film festival, and turn it into a education and outreach for underserved youth, for doing summer camps and things like that, teaching them how to do films.
That's
and
awesome.
We started doing some of that, but then my life kind of got in the way, and
well, yeah, it's super time consuming to do that, and at the same time you're building your studio, and the business. And so, obviously it's difficult.
And I was burning my volunteers into the ground too, because I wasn't doing it by myself.
Yeah,
my best friend in the world, Jim Henderson, he and I did it together. It really wasn't just me. Like he was as much a part of the successes.
How do you go about getting films to have in the festival? Do you is it networking people?
Yeah, you can market online. At the time, there were only a handful of websites that you could do online submissions through, but they were taking a massive amount of the entry fees and stuff like that. So the last couple of years of the festival, I just curated it on my own. And I actually kind of saw another trend happening, and that was I could go on Vimeo and watch short films all day, every day that people are making in their basements that are better than anything I could do. And it's free. So unless the film festival is bringing something to your audience that you can't get from watching
just on Vimeo,
free stuff on Vimeo or YouTube all day long every day, then film festivals are actually kind of a dying thing. And the market got really saturated. There was a new film festival everywhere.
In every state, everyone thought it was the hip and trendy thing to do.
Yeah.
So what separates like a film festival like yours to the Sundance? Is it just the level of people willing to come and be a part of it, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, Sundance had name power behind it. The people who started it already had big names.
Yeah, it helps to have a Redford.
Big money.
Yeah, Redford.
All that stuff. But mine was a little bit more homegrown, and I also found that in order to get my audiences, I had to have a lot of local filmmakers.
I was just going to ask.
So about half the films ended up being locals, so that we could have them help generate audience and stuff like that.
It's like having the local band on the opening bill.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, both Mike and I have a lot of experience doing events and things like that. And yeah, that's kind of a common trick is you get the best band in any market to open for whatever band you're bringing through.
Yeah.
And you can draw some people out.
I had a lot of support, and filmmakers loved it. We treated them well. We had a good event. It's like I said, I kind of let other things kind of inundate my time. Great, gladly.
I think it's just one of those things that comes with age too. I mean,
it's a natural progression.
I haven't done
things.
an event in years, and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily because of my family, but it's for sure because of my family.
Yeah, you don't blame them.
Yeah,
you don't blame them
right.
because you make that choice. You're like, my family is more important to me than.
Well, and when you're 24, 25, 26, you can gamble.
Yeah, you got nothing but time.
You can do a little bit more gambling. You got more time
and energy.
Yeah, I mean, because with Mike and I, we never made huge money on any show, and sometimes lost money or whatever, but we did it because we love doing it, more than anything.
Well, it's exciting. Every time you put something together, there's a different scenario, a different outcome, different, you never know how it's going to go. And it could be really good, really bad, but it's almost like a gambling addiction.
Yeah, no, it's funny though. I felt that energy. I was talking to a guy last night, and I was getting all jazzed up. He's looking for ways to try and breathe life into his business, and events are kind of a thing I've tried to sell to people before, which has worked out pretty good for clients and things. And so I was pitching to this guy. I was like, why aren't you doing? He's a yoga instructor, so I was like, why aren't you doing retreats? Why aren't you going up in the woods? Why aren't you bringing people out and getting into your chakras and your spiritual journeys and all this good stuff? And, so he and I talked a lot about the ways that events can work as a good extension of your brand or your service or whatever. And so it's a logical one for a company like Foresight to do something like that. But I also like that bit of sort of community involvement and even if it didn't get fully fleshed out, but the inspiration or the wish to do good for kids or, whatever. I think all that's really good and comes from a good place.
The networking was good too, because I did have a lot of people come to me and ask me to do videos and things like that, just because my name was on the top. Yeah, everybody was like, "Oh, well, he's the film guy in Ogden."
No, it's true.
Even in the chamber, they were like, "Oh, well, you should go visit Scott because he runs the film festival." Yeah.
Well, there's so much about establishing yourself as an expert and just publishing content and putting material out there to sort of make yourself the pro. And unfortunately, many people who are just hyper motivated could make themselves the pro without being a pro.
Well, it's like Ian Paget, the logo geek guy. I mean, he got into it because he liked logos, but after a while, he'd done so much research on it, he
became the expert.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing, but it's funny because that is kind of how the networking works. And even in my, business now, I'm doing a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm generating a lot of content right now. And the whole purpose is, establish myself as an expert in the field. And so events, I think, are a good way to do that.
So coming out of Weber, what was your first kind of gig out the door? You got your bachelor's, you put on the film festival. What happened next?
Okay. Well, before I answer that question, I'll say I'm now an adjunct professor at Weber State, so I teach the video editing and motion graphics classes up there.
Nice.
So
and
Go Cats,
which is also
they're the Cats, right? Wildcats.
Wildcats. Yeah.
Go Cats.
Red logo, right?
They are
not
flying purple.
Not the blue one with the Y on it.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
the purple one with the W.
These guys are the purple ones.
But that's been a good networking opportunity too, because a lot of students will come on behalf of their company. Like maybe they're interested in video and their company's paying for their education. So they take a video editing class and they learn just enough to realize that in order to do a really good video, they might as well just hire me.
Yeah.
So I've had several former students whose bosses have come to me,
gone back to work and then come for you
and asked to have me do work. So and I actually have a couple of students who work for me now.
Yeah.
So that's been a really good networking opportunity. But to answer your question, one of the things I talk to my students about is like how I arrived at where I am now, which I feel like I'm lucky because I never the people who work for me now are even more lucky because I gave them jobs out of college and I never got a job
that
out
opportunity.
Of college.
Yeah.
I actually went out of college and said, okay, now I need to figure out how to make this work. And in my field, there aren't a lot of jobs, like full-time jobs where you get a salary and you check into work and you get your paid time off and all that, and your benefits and everything. There's not many jobs like that. There are lots and lots of gigs.
Yeah.
So that's again where the networking comes in, and I'm so glad that I'm kind of beyond this. Like I feel like I'm reverting back into a 10-year ago self, where literally everywhere you go, you have to tell everybody you meet how amazing you are and how much you should, how much they should hire you and how valuable you could be to them if you just do the video for them, instead of somebody else. You're constantly selling yourself to everybody you come across.
Have you ever watched Portlandia?
Yes.
Okay, they have an episode where you come to my DJ night. And I totally relate to that. It's like you're telling everyone, you're trying to get everyone to come and be excited about it. And after a while, you're just like, man, I don't even want to be here.
Yeah. Well, and don't let me speak for you, Mike, but I'm sure it's, similar in the audio engineering space, you know, because not every business needs an audio engineer, so it's kind of a gig-based system, so that networking is key.
If you get your foot in the door in a good studio, you have a good gig. But unless you get that, it's kind of like you're off doing your own thing.
There's only so many, right? So I mean, if you live in a market that has 10 great studios,
and going into
20,
the studio, you're the dude cleaning the bathrooms, taking the garbage out, and then one day, mixing engineer might not be there, so now you get to fill in or you get to help set up mics, and you slowly work your way up. So it's
it's a slog.
So I had nothing but raw motivation in college, because while I was in college, I made like 10 or 11 short films a year, and then I graduated, and then it was down to like 2 or 3. But I would make little compilation discs and go around to anybody that I already had a connection with. And I would just take them a copy of my compilation DVD of the short films that I had just finished. And, with each one, you get a little bit better because you learn things, and it's just naturally the more you practice at something, the better you get at it. Till one day I dropped off a DVD to, Thomas Arts, to the Thomases, and they said, "Oh, that's cute. You're making videos. Oh, you're a little neighbor." Because I was like a neighbor.
Not exactly what you're going for,
well,
right?
I was a neighbor of theirs, so they saw me as like little Scott Halford around the corner, has grown up, and now he's making these videos. Good for him.
Adorable.
Pat me on the head. But then I came back a couple years later, dropped off my next compilation of short films, and they were like, "Oh, well, what have you been up to?" And I said, "Well, I've been freelancing for X company and Y company." And they said, "Oh, well, what are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, I'm just going around and showing off my stuff." And they said, "Well, we could maybe use you for a bit." And so I did a little stint there, left, made some more short films, brought the next compilation back. And it's funny because I talk about how every time I went back and they asked me what I'm charging, I cringed when I said, well, I was making $15 an hour at this other production company, feeling pretty good about myself.
Right.
They were making bank on me.
Yeah.
So I went back to Thomas Arts, and when they said, "Well, how much do you charge?" and I was like, $25, because I'd been making 15. They were like, "Done. Let's have you do stuff." I had no idea how good of a deal I was giving them.
Right.
What's the normal going rate?
Well, I don't know.
I know
if
there's
that's
probably
really,
levels
a lot of factors in that, but
well, if you go, a large
fresh college student coming out of college, what should he expect to?
If you're lucky enough to get a job, if you can get one in the 30s or 40s, like you're pretty lucky because that's fresh out of college, you know?
And that's great money for a recent grad.
If you really, the thing is, college can be great if you really apply yourself and it's like, okay, I'm learning this in class. Here's what I'm going to go to do to apply that to what I want to be doing. And then by the time you're done with college, you don't just have your grades and your piece of paper. You actually have stuff
like
that
a
you've
body of
made.
work.
See, that's where I fell off. Like, because I went through college for audio engineering, and I did like projects like short films where we had this cartoon, and it was a robot, and you had to add all the audio to it. So like his arm moves, you got to get like a servo moving, and like all the different sound effects. And I did a really good job on all of that, but I never saved any of the material. I turned it in, and that was that. And now going back, I'm like, oh, well, that would have been awesome for a portfolio. That would have been awesome to have to show because I thought it turned out good, but it's all on a hard drive that died, which is
oh wow.
Well, I think too what Scott's saying a little bit is also sort of reflective of my college experience. I mean, you know, the school that I went to, Idaho State, has like a mass communications program, but it's kind of all encompassing. And at the time I was going through there, it was really more to do with news writing than it was with ads or anything else. In fact, I took a number of like journalism courses, even though I had nothing to do, you know, it wasn't something I had any interest in. But their design courses, you know, were pretty slim and pretty not great. In fact, one semester, me and a friend of mine, this guy, Jesse Senna, that I used to share an office with, he's a photographer, and he and I taught a big portion of the Photoshop class because we lost our professor mid-semester, and they brought in a CIS student to teach it.
Wow.
Who didn't know Photoshop at all. So the two of us ended up teaching it. And so, but to Scott's point about sort of...
And they gave you credit for that.
Oh, yeah.
As a student.
I got to pay for credit.
Oh, that's even better.
Even better.
Yeah. But, I learned Premiere with my video editing teacher at Weber. Yeah. That's why I'm teaching it now.
Right. Well, and I think that's the point, right? Is the people who can make college something valuable or important are the people who really apply it, but then beyond just school hours, they're making short films like Scott was doing, or doing Photoshop jobs like I was doing. And, you know, or like in Mike's case, you know, out DJing and applying the craft of audio engineering wherever he is.
That's part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast, because
But like school is kind of the incidental thing, you know, like school's a part of it, but the rest really comes from that drive and motivation.
I would never tell anybody not to get a degree, but I would tell them not to let the institution sell them on the idea that the piece of paper is going to get them a job.
Yeah.
Well, so
it's what you do while you get that piece of paper and what you do after that is going.
Well, let me have
nobody cares. No, I mean, they're like, oh yeah, okay, you got a bachelor's degree from XYZ University, great,
especially in creative stuff.
Nobody cares what your GPA was.
Right.
They want to see what you're going to do for them, and that is the work that you produced.
Yeah. Is it Joe Rogan that does the bit on the doctor? Like, there's no one's no. It was Seinfeld. Seinfeld had the bit on it where it was like, there's always that bottom of the class doctor that is a doctor, but he did the worst in the class, and no one's going to go and say, yeah, go to my doctor. He's great. He was the bottom of the class, but you know, it was a funny bit when he said it. I can't do it justice, but I mean. I just thought that was funny, you know, like, you know, they graduated, they got the degree, they're a doctor, but
well, it's true. And Mike knows, because we've been bringing this up with a lot of these CEOs and tech guys that we've been talking to lately, because I'm really interested in sort of the future of education. You know, I think that
it's going online, man.
Yeah, it seems like online is where it's going. And then also I kind of wonder, I feel like we're almost regressing back to when trade schools were a thing.
Yeah.
And now you'll hyper focus on what it is that you want to do. And the idea of the rounded education is going to be left for the doctors.
Generals
or
in college are just high school over again. Yeah. Well, you know, I don't need to do high school over again. I did that.
So, okay, question as far as in the creative design field and everything like that, how... Like you're in video, you're in design, I'm in audio.
Yeah, I kind of have the three of us. We could just do just about anything.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is like being multi-talented across software platforms. How important is that to know Photoshop when you're doing video, to know audio when you're doing video, to know like you have to kind of be a master of all trades.
Yeah, you really have to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so this is me and my business. If I didn't know how to master audio, record audio, run a camera, operate lights, do the editing, do the motion graphics, I would need to for my business be generating enough work to keep each person who has each one of those jobs employed.
Yeah.
I'm actually purposefully trying to keep it a little bit simpler, where it's like
less headache.
It's if I can do it by myself, I can do it faster the way I like to do it every time, and I can deliver the product on time because I'm the only one that's accountable to the deadline.
Do you feel yourself getting swamped down too much though? Like,
well, I can, and that's when it's like, okay, as long as I can only bring in like 2 or 3 other people, I can still keep it simple enough that I can manage it. Otherwise, I'm talking about what you were asking earlier about prices. If I have to start bringing in an account manager, accountant, an additional accountant, a project manager, a creative director, all that stuff, and all the support staff that go into keeping that amount of work flowing in and out of the business, you're getting up to charging $150 to $200 an hour for everybody's time just to cover the overhead.
Yeah.
As a freelancer, I can charge half what an agency will charge, and I will make the same work,
the same product, the same end
the
result,
exact same thing. Yeah.
But it's just you that you're relying on versus 7 other people.
It's me and my gear in my office.
Yeah.
It's not the account services team. It's not the accountants and the lawyers and everything. I mean, I have those things, but they're not on staff.
Yeah, they're not full time. They're not
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like that, especially in a younger person's career, it is important to be really good at a number of things and sort of master a number of different software and things like that. And that poises you later for leadership and things like that because you can do those things. And I think really, like to Scott's point, it really has more to do with scale when you need to start bringing on all those people.
Yeah, because every additional person you need to bring in is another $1,000 a day that you need to cover.
But if you could build sort of like a super group of a bunch of people with a bunch of characteristics, a bunch of abilities, you could do a lot more with a lot fewer people.
Right, because you and I work together, but neither one of us are employing each other.
Right. Yeah, you're not covering his salary, but he's part of the team.
Yeah, when we work together, I pay him, he makes money, and if he brings me a job, he pays me and I make money. And
yeah,
nice.
Yeah, and so I don't know. So I think the question you're asking is sort of where's the balance between the master of all things and what's
jack
the
of all trades, master of none.
Master of none.
Yeah,
I think that there's definitely a balance. Like at least in my mind, there's a place where you just can't do it all, and you do need to bring on some support. Like Scott's got a couple guys that work for him and stuff, and that's obviously to help, I guess, spread his wings a little bit and scale up a little bit. But I think that in terms of like you, the individual, obviously the more you can do, the more knowledgeable you'll be about everything. But, you still only have a certain number of hours in the day. So depending on what your priorities are, whether your intent is to stay small or your intent is to grow, or scale, it probably has more to do with what your intention is in terms of, where that balance is or how much you need to be a master of all things versus not.
And one thing I like to talk about with people is, as a freelancer, I feel really lucky that I have been able to work in an agency because I know how they work and I know how they price things. And so I know that I can, I know my worth. I know my value because I know how it stacks up to the agency prices. I remember cringing the first time I had the audacity to tell somebody I wanted to make $50 an hour on a freelance job, but now I kind of do it based on the job. If they want a job, like if they just want to know how much this thing's going to cost, I'm like, well, this is how much I think it's going to take me. And if I want to make $100 an hour, then I think it's probably about $3,000.
Yeah.
And if they're happy with that price, then guess what that is for me? That's a challenge to get it done in 15.
Yeah.
Because then I can make $200 an hour.
Twice the amount of money, and you're working harder.
And it doesn't make any difference to the client because they're getting the product that they're at the price that they want to pay. Do you ever find
that kind of bites you in the butt, and you realize, oh crap, I underbudgeted? Yeah,
it can. Yeah. So what I usually do is I say, I think the maximum a video like this should
Plus
ever
or minus
cost.
10% or
Right.
something. Yeah.
The most this should ever cost is $5,000. But if that's too much for you, then I'll just keep track of my time. And if I only spend this much time on it, I'll only charge you for that. But like, because I would never pay more than $5,000, I won't charge you more than $5,000. So
Yeah.
I
There
try to
comes
be
a
fair
point
with
where
people that way.
You can charge X amount of dollars and be the top tier, but at the same time, you're kind of cutting your pool of clients in half by doing that. And sometimes it works out good because you're busy enough where that's the right move to do. But at the same time, if you end up losing your clients in the process, it might be better just to keep them,
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts on that. Like when it comes to pricing and knowing your worth, because like part of it is, like you're saying, retaining old clients, things like that. But a lot of times with those rate hikes, you get, the better clients. And some of that has to do with perceived value, and everything is a put up or shut up scenario. So if you say you're the best and you cost $200 an hour, the work you produce better damn well be worth $200 an hour, or you'll never see that client again and word will spread fast. But, sort of like Scott's talking about, having gone from $15 an hour to 25 to, oh my God, 50 to, well beyond that now. My trajectory was the same. I remember doing $20 an hour for design work, and I was working at 2 a.m. and running a day job and doing everything else. And my clients were great. They were what I needed in that time. They, were business cards and kind of low level work, but just production stuff kept me busy. And, at that stage in my life, it was worthwhile. Then as you start to grow, you have to sort of pivot or adjust your pricing based on the type of work you want to do and how much time you have to do it. Because at some point, like the whole reason I started charging money in the first place was before that, I did concert posters for friends. And as their bands and stuff would start to grow and I'd get a reputation and start doing more and more and more posters, at some point I had to start charging because I was doing 50 free posters. Like I had to say, okay, well, just give me $20, and then I can prioritize your poster.
You're saying something that most people in college wanting to get a job don't want to hear, though.
Is that whole work for free part?
Yeah, you're going to have to. If you didn't make those posters for free, you wouldn't have the work to show. Reputation. And you wouldn't be able to say, hey, it's like, well, what have you done that makes you worth that?
Well, and it's funny because I don't want to come off as like, old Grandpa Rogar or whatever, because I understand that, things have changed and evolved. But we're definitely setting up the younger kids to sort of run into that brick wall when they come out of school or wherever.
They're expecting to.
Well, everybody thinks they're going to be a social media influencer or something and that they're automatically worth some money. But like when you start dealing with businesses, like they have hard number of dollars that they can spend on you. And those hard number of dollars need to return double that. So, you may have a great social media profile, but if you can't double my return, then, or double what I spent, then it's not worth doing. And so it's one example, and we brought it up on this show before, so I won't beat it into the ground, but it's the BYU Ad Lab scenario. So, and it's just because I happen to have experience with those guys. But I mean, I saw it at Idaho State and a number of different places. But in BYU's Ad Lab, which is really a great ad school, and it's a great place to go learn to do this work or to work in the advertising field, they give people real life job titles. So they, as they work through school, they, are a junior designer, then a designer, then an art director, then a senior art director, then a creative director or whatever by the time they graduate. And then when you go and meet this, about to graduate college kid, he introduces himself as a creative director. And so then when you see that he's got the same portfolio as the art directors and the, junior designers and everybody else that were there, because he didn't actually creative direct anything, he just got older. Or more experience, or he hung out longer, or whatever.
Well, I'm sure part of their final project, kind of like what you had to do your a capstone project or whatever. I'm sure they have to direct that to an extent.
Sure,
but that's still not the same as.
And they produce a lot of them, like especially the real achievers produce great work. I mean, the like when I used to run the Addies and stuff. I mean, the video work and stuff that would come out of BYU's Ad Lab is very good. So I mean, I don't mean to put them down in any way, but I think that the thing is that when they come out with a predetermined idea that they're going to be an art director, they want to go to an ad agency and say, hey, hire me as an art director, but they're really pretty low in the pickings as far as designers go. And, they don't generally come in as a creative director right out of college. I'm sure there's examples, and somebody will email us and say so. But
Ryan, you don't know Jack.
Yeah, but I think in general, to sort of circle back around to the point, the value or perceived value is really sort of where your pricing structure and all that stuff comes into place.
Well,
and that's predicated on knowing your worth and knowing.
Lots of times, for me, like my pricing structure is kind of to eliminate a lot of the crap clients, and then also to get away from being too micromanaged. So I kind of sit right in the middle.
Yeah.
I have a wedding planner that I work with a lot, and she has kind of like a budget that I need to be within to be able to work with her clients. And I kind of just leave it in that price range because she handles a lot of the paperwork, a lot of the hassle that I have to deal with. And it makes things easier for me, but it also makes it.
Well, the point that I use to sort of illustrate perception is that, you may know a great designer. Maybe it's your friend's brother, and he's a great designer. He charges $35 an hour, and the work he turns out is great. Everybody loves it. That guy at $35 an hour will never work for Pepsi, because Pepsi's not going to hire a $30 an hour designer. Even if he does the same work and he charges them $100 an hour, they'd be much more apt to take the $100 an hour version than the $30 version.
Just because they think they're getting more.
Just because they think they're getting more. You know? And so now granted, again, it's put up or shut up. I mean, he has to be worth the $100 when they pay it, but a lot of it's that perception. You could be a really skilled guy, but if you're pricing yourself wrong, then you may be doing yourself a disservice, taking the wrong type of clients, burning hours when you shouldn't be burning hours, or so on.
You also have to remember that with every job you take and every job you do, you're building a track record. Even if whether or not you're doing that work, repeated work for the same client over and over and over, because what you're able to tell yourself will reflect in what you're able to tell your potential clients. I have one client that has been very faithful to me for about 18 months now, but that it took them about 6 months to even give me a job because I didn't bat an eye when I said, I want to make $100 an hour doing motion graphics work for you.
Because in your case, you'd proven your worth.
They thought, that's because I've been doing this for a little while now. But but the reason why I know I was worth that is because what they were asking me to do, I know I'm good at, and I know I'm fast at.
And they took a long time. How long it's going to take, too.
Right?
Yeah.
And they took a little while because that was kind of a little bit expensive for them. And then finally, they just reached saturation with all the freelancers that they had, and they finally had to call me. Well, guess what? My invoice came in less than the other freelancers they were using, and they were more happy with the work. And I delivered it.
That's what you get when you hire a professional versus.
Okay. So, but there's also customer service. You know, it's like, if I commit to a project, I am committing to get it done on time or early. And I can't tell you how many times I've picked up a job where someone's called me and said, hey, we hired this guy to do this. He just ditched us over the weekend. Can you help us out?
They
are never going back to that guy again, ever.
That's what happens with brides and people in the wedding industry that try and hire their DJ or their wedding planner or whatever on Craigslist, trying to go for the broke, and then they realize that the $400 DJ that they hire on Craigslist canceled on them last minute.
Exactly.
And now what, Now they're going and they can't find the professional, and it's every industry has that.
Last year, I made really good money on this client, and they actually tossed me some of their higher profile work because I knew that they were going to get it on time. They knew they were going to get my work, and they ended up winning awards for it.
Nice.
And it has turned out to be really good for their company. And that's kind of where
how does that work for you?
Well, that's where I've kind of set my market at. I'm here to help you with your relationship with your client.
Okay.
I'm not,
synergy.
Because I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. I am good at making swords. I am not good at drawing pictures of swords.
Okay. All right.
That's why Ryan's here. Ryan, you draw me a picture of a sword. I will make you the most beautiful sword you have ever seen.
Yep.
But I can't draw that original picture to save my life. So I'm not here to like take your creative director's job. I'm just here so that when you get busy, I can execute your creative concepts.
Yep.
And that was Scott. Awesome episode, like we said before. Just lots of neat, good business talk and things that we weren't really expecting to talk about when we went through. And
as we've mentioned prior to the clip, I mean, he had so much like wisdom and business savvy and all the stuff that, I mean, just I know him as like an artistic guy. He's a great motion graphics guy, videographer guy. And I hadn't, I guess it didn't even occur to me, all those other things. And, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think it was very worthwhile. So I would recommend everybody go back, and if you get a minute, go check it out. It's episode number 57. You can hear it at Eggshow or eggscast.com and on iTunes, and of course all those good places. Yeah. So who do we have next, Mikey?
Dan Davis with Sturry. And,
so Sturry was an interesting one. And actually they were, or one of, I guess, the most memorable things from it is the fact that they offered I guess we should say what they are first. So Sturry is a video platform that creates video stories, these little biographies on people that help you discover your true potential and share the good, in quotes. Share the good is sort of their thing. And it's the idea that sort of in this world of fake news or whatever we're calling it these days, and just sort of the negativity that's rampant everywhere, the Sturry stories are,
say that 6 times fast.
Yeah, right. They're sort of inspirational and tales of people doing great things. And so I really like the positivity. They also produce a great product. And but they, unbeknownst to us prior to arrival, which is crystal clear as soon as you see the image,
right.
They, as a film company, offered to videotape our podcast. And it was the first time that Mike and I had gotten out in front of the camera to do the show. And I think both of us had ball caps on and all kinds of stuff. I mean, we were not prepared to be on camera.
If you know me, I wear a ball cap 95% of the time. The only time I don't is when you're paying me to take it off. So,
well, I think I'd have sprung and combed my hair if I'd have known we were going to be on tape. But nonetheless, I was grateful that they did it. It's running on our YouTube channel now. And it's kind of a fun way to experience the podcast. Their little studio that we sat down to record the show in is pretty teeny, so we're right on top of each other. But nonetheless, it's kind of fun to see us in the flesh talking and having a great visit with Dan.
Yeah. So really awesome episode, and let's do it.
All right. This is Dan Davis, CEO and founder of Sturry.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in my life, I always thought my story, this is one thing that we really help people do, is discover their story. And I think people think of that as a timeline. And really your story is not, it can be a timeline, but if your story is just a timeline, then your story is not, you're not letting it move you to do something great. And so I looked at my life as a timeline and looked at just the events and the things that didn't work out. And I didn't learn from some of those things. And have you ever read the book, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years by Donald Miller?
Mm-mm. Yeah, I haven't read it, but
it's I recommend that because it talks about your story. Where you learn the most from your story is the story arc. And the story arc, the meat of your story, is those difficult experiences and doing something that stretches you. And I felt like being an entrepreneur would do that for me, but I wasn't taking the lessons I should have from those experiences. And that failure of my first business, no one knew it was a failure. I wasn't even honest with myself about it being a failure. And I actually restarted that business, rebought all of that equipment. I hired an attorney to get all that stuff back from me. I got $40 worth of stuff back.
$1,500 in attorney fees or more.
A lot more than that. I wish it was $1,500, but it took me several years to pay that off and try to recoup my business and my clients and all the things that had been damaged. And I didn't see that as the sign that I should have, that it was time to move on.
Yeah.
And that business at the time was making no money. I was just spending money, and it was hard on my family. It was hard on me. And I didn't recognize that as a failure and as a learning experience until years later.
So what was the final, straw on the camel's back that said, hey, I'm done with this? Was it just like you finally saw the writing on the wall and realized,
so in debt. That's really what it was. I repurchased all that stuff, had all these legal fees, and tried to run the business again for another year. And really what it was is being able to answer to my wife that this was worth it, and that this is more than just my pride. And really what it was my pride.
Yeah.
And I felt like, the influences that had influenced me with my spirituality, my faith, and my relationships with people, I had been ignoring those things and just said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to recover. I've done hard things before. My life has always been, in one way or another. And I say this from a positive standpoint now. It's been difficult.
Yeah.
From a health standpoint, I have arthritis, and who would have thought? And, when I got diagnosed with that in my early 20s that I would. Yeah. So I knew how to do hard things. And so I convinced myself and was prideful and said, I'm going to beat this. But to answer your question, because that's what I should do when you ask me a question, right?
That's okay. We meander a lot, so don't worry.
We just go off. But in relationship to what I was saying, I didn't let that influence me in the way that I should have let that influence me, to show me that it was time to move on to something new. And that was when I had to answer to my wife and say, you know what, we can't spend any more money anymore. I need to provide for the family. And I took my work vehicle that had a wrap on it, that had my business on it, my failing business. I was driving it around and showing everybody it. 2 job interviews, and eventually to my first job out of college.
What was your first job out of college?
It was actually a health and wellness company. It was kind of related a little bit to what I was doing. And I was a salesman. That's all I was.
Yeah.
And come to find out, that company actually, when I showed up in my work vehicle and I'm dressing up, which I was wearing basketball shorts and a t-shirt every day, and now I'm wearing a tie and trying to go sell somebody else's business in my old company vehicle.
Yeah.
It was fun.
I'm sure.
So from there, from sports and fitness and stuff like that, you started to transition into doing filmmaking and I guess traditionally creative ventures. Yeah. So you spent some time working with a local film company here. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? And then let's talk about the transition to Stirry.
Yeah.
50 films, is that what they're called?
Yeah. So I actually, that job with that health and wellness company didn't work out. They actually pulled me in one day and said, we hired you before we could afford you. And I thought, that's
not smart, huh?
That's why I wanted to be an entrepreneur all along, right? I didn't want to be in the mercy of somebody else. And so I had to go through that process again and try to apply for jobs and try to find something new. And it was when the economy wasn't fantastic. And so I applied to this job at 50 Films, and they told us that after just I think it was 30 minutes to an hour, they had 250 applicants.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Very, very qualified people. And I'm looking at myself going, well, I'm not qualified. I've never worked in that industry before. I've never run that type of company. But the director of that company was looking for a business person to run his business for him. And the prior person had left. And so he needed an entrepreneur to come in and just kind of shape things up. And it was a great experience. I didn't think I would get the job, but I did. And I didn't know how much I loved video and love storytelling and love how powerful it is. And I started to recognize that within myself. All these experiences in my life with video, I started to analyze them and see, man, video is one of the greatest tools to communicate this emotion and evoke this idea that we are meant to do something more than what we're currently doing. And so I took that job. It wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but it turned into a great experience. And I discovered that discovery of video storytelling. But the problem was most of the stuff that we were doing was not self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
It was commercial
just
work.
ads. Like
We've
TV
all
stuff.
been there.
Yeah. I mean, you got to pay the bills. And I mean, there's definitely people who are happy living in that space, commercial artists, commercial filmmakers, things like that. And I mean, you can make, a nice living doing that kind of work. And I mean, it's obviously, but it's a little bit more just work. And for somebody who's entrepreneurial, I can sort of relate to this. Yeah. I mean, it is a little bit soul crushing. It's hard to not be out there chasing your own thing, whatever it is. And so from 50 Films, I mean, obviously you got some technical background and some understanding of the process of things, but was there a pivotal moment or some sort of something that made you decide, okay, enough of this, I've got to move into my business, and thus Stirry was born?
Yeah, I mean, it actually came from, to make a really long story short, it came from my wife telling me one day. Our relationship had been built on just being truly honest with each other, and she actually said, "You've changed." And that was a very hurtful thing for me. And she didn't mean it to hurt. She just meant it to help. And what she meant by that, I lost a lot. When you say soul crushing, that's exactly what it did for me. I felt like I lost who I was because I was focused on product and not people.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was that pivotal moment that I said, you know what, this is not worth it. It doesn't matter how much money I make or how much money I'm making for this company. This is not who I am. I took a little detour and took another job with another company to be a CEO of a company down in Arizona. And it was in healthcare, and I found out that I did not like that was not a good fit for me.
As a guy that works with healthcare a lot, it's not a fit for most people. I don't.
It's hard, and the facility I was running had 115 employees and 80 patients, and that I was responsible over, and the stress and I had a 40,000 square foot facility. All the medical stuff, that I didn't really have interest in that, but I joined that company because of the people side. And I love that part, but just really disliked the healthcare industry. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad industry. It just meant for me, that wasn't a great fit.
It just didn't fit you.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I actually resigned from that position and was unemployed for about 3 or 4 months. And in the process of that, I actually started to go back to my roots of reading these business books and reading all sorts of books to help myself and reconnecting myself spiritually and with business and all that. And I discovered this pattern throughout all of my transitions to all these different companies. And that was that my greatest ability is not something that you would put on LinkedIn or your resume, but it was connecting with people and understanding how to do that. And I started to discover that. And then I started to discover that video was one of the best ways to do that and to raise your area of influence to, further than just people having conversations face to face. And so I ran into another gentleman that was unemployed as well. He told me he didn't say I have an amazing story. He said, I have a story. I'm not sure if I should share it in my job interviews. And I thought, well, that's okay. What is this?
Yeah, geez, what are you going to tell me? Do I need a lawyer present?
Exactly. And so I was
and here comes the multi-level.
yeah, exactly. So I invited him into my house and he shared. No, I'm just kidding. But I thought that was a really strange way to tell someone you have a story. And so he knew I worked in healthcare. And so he was trying to get a healthcare job. And so I said, come on by, I'll help you. And I was actually in this facility. It's a work in progress now, but you should have seen it before.
Yeah.
I was in this back room. It was basically a closet with boxes stacked over the windows.
Keep the light
dark hole. Yeah. And I knew I needed to go somewhere to focus, not around our 2 little kids at home that were raising hell. And so I was there and I invited him to my office and he proceeded to tell me this amazing story. And I won't spoil it because it's on our website and you can watch it. But
we'll be sure to share a link and put it in the show notes.
It's just a fascinating story about personal, forgiving himself for a tragic mistake that this man made. But he ended up being paralyzed and running an Olympic length triathlon. And I thought, man, if I was to interview you and I saw that you were able to do that, you could do anything.
Yeah.
And so I told him, yeah, you should share that story. And then I just had this gut impression. One of my things that I always talk about is trusting your gut. I just was walking him to the door and I said, can I share your story? And I didn't even know really what that meant. And he didn't know what that meant. And I said, I used to work in film. I can put together a crew and I would love to share your story. And at this time I had no money. We had already taken out several credit cards. We had all this debt from moving back from this company
from Peoria.
Yeah. This company didn't pay for me to move back from Arizona. So we just took on a bunch of debt to do that. We lost our deposit on our, apartment or house that we were renting down there. And so we had no insurance, anything. And I just told this guy I'd film his story and I knew how much it would do that. Yeah. So that's kind of how Sturry started.
Was with him, but coming up with Sturry and the concept of the website and the idea behind it, like, did that kind of just get the ball rolling and then you just kind of downhill from there? Or was it more like, voila, there it is kind of thing? Like,
it definitely wasn't voila, there it is. It took some serious energy, both physical and mental and spiritual, for me to go through this process of discovery, right? It was basically that I discovered myself and then the business followed. And I actually think that that's what, if I was to give any advice to entrepreneurs, that it would be, the first thing would be trust your gut, because people are going to give you advice all day long. People are going to tell you
whether you want it or not.
Exactly. Yeah. It's going to be offered, whether that's through parents or family or friends, peers. It doesn't matter. People are going to tell you probably what they think is best for you. But what's best for you is not what other people think. It's what you feel like you should do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Dan. Like we said earlier, there's a YouTube video of that episode floating around on our channel.
Yeah,
so
I don't know if I go so far as to say that it's worth the watch, because I'm still a little self-conscious about it, but nonetheless, it was really cool of them to put that together for us. It looks great. Obviously, they're professionals and know what they're doing, so they made a nice looking video of us, and it was a cool way to showcase this episode. So do be sure to go back and check out, not just the YouTube video, which is running live on our channel, but go back to episode 54 and listen to the full episode with Dan. Really interesting stuff, and check out their website at sturry.com. So anyway, all right. Well, with that, I think we have had, what amounts to a great clip show. Lots of good information, and honestly, I would say that these clips don't do any of these guys justice. It's definitely worth going back and listening to them long form, either on their episodes of the Eggs Show, or wherever they may be found, on other people's shows or whatever. All these guests have been really great and influential people. All have a really great story to tell and a lot of really great information to share. And I would say the more ways that you can digest their content, the better off you'll be.
Definitely. Yeah. Google each person individually, I'd say, because there's more content out there,
Yep. Yeah. And you'll find, some of them, the way they talk, the different types of conversation or the different subjects they cover, things like that might appeal to you more than others. And like Mike said, just Google them and follow them on the socials and all that stuff, because they're all worth paying attention to.
Definitely. So
cool.
Thanks
well,
for
with that,
listening.
then let's wrap this baby up and get back to the last couple weeks of summer. I guess my summer's technically done. My boys both started football on Monday, so.
Oh yeah.
So so summer's done. But anyway, I think there may be a little bit of travel left in us before the sort of the snow flies. I think it's TBA or whatever, but I think in September we're going to try and make a Seattle run with the Eggs Show.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That's sort of something we're working on. So that's really cool. And also just looking for other opportunities. Before we go, I want to encourage everybody to check out our little micro podcast, Eggstra. It's EGGSTRA. Mike and I have been a little hit and miss posting on it lately. And
well, to be honest with you,
nonsense.
I posted 2 days ago while I was driving home, and then I deleted it because I rambled.
You're not supposed to do that, Mike. It's supposed to be free form.
No. I listened to it 2 or 3 times. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Then when I woke up the next day and listened to it, I'm like, no.
Yeah, you've got to stop listening to it. That's key.
Yeah.
So, but basically what Eggstra is just this, it varies. Most of them aren't more than 3 to 5 minutes long. I think I dropped a 7-minute bomber the other day, so sorry about that.
Mine was 19 minutes, the one that I deleted. So
see, you spent 20 minutes sitting there recording that thing. You really should have kept that up. So, but anyway, nonetheless, the whole point of Eggstra is to have these little micro podcasts. We're using this platform called Anchor that allows us to sort of podcast from our phones. The idea is that we're sharing little slices of life or little observations as we come across them. It's content or information that maybe isn't large scale enough to fit the main show, to land on the Eggs Show, but it's stuff that we can just sort of bring up and observe as we go, especially since Mike and I do so much traveling and moving around. It's, there's always little things going on.
Yeah.
So anyway, do check that out. Also, the other thing I am trying to push more lately is we're still pushing hard to get some more audience participation. I would love to start getting more email and contact with the listeners of the show, so we can get to know you guys, how we can do the show better to make you guys happier, the types of guests you want to hear, who you like, who you don't. suggestions or recommendations for people to have on the show, or tweaks to the format, whatever, Mike and I both work very hard on this show to try and improve it constantly as it goes. And if you need a reminder, just go back to those first 10 episodes and find yourself going, what the fuck is happening?
What is this shit?
And so it's definitely come a long ways, and I think it's getting better each time. But please, hit us up. You can go to eggscast.com and go to the contact form, shoot us a note. Otherwise, you can hit us up on the Anchor.fm app or website, or shoot us an email at info@eggscast.com. So with that, unless you've got anything else, Mike, I think we'll call it a night.
Nope. That's it. You still at R2MG, or you changed that?
Yep, nope, still R2MG.com or RyanRogar.com also. Yep. And at R2MG on Twitter and at R2 Media Group on Instagram.
Yep, and I'm at DJOntic.com, and I guess that's it.
All right, sounds rocking. Well, it is creeping up on midnight. We're 3 minutes short of August 1st. The show will air on Thursday, and you're going to love it. I just know that about it. So, but my kids are screaming in the other room, so I'm going to go yell at them and then call it a night myself. So,
all right, it's good talking with you, Ryan.
Yeah, I hope it was great. I hope everybody enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.